I saw myself caught between the radical counterculture and the establishment, and realizing that I was a member of neither. The validity of the government in my own mind was seriously jeopardized by the experience of the war and the divisive reaction to it within the United States. I came not to believe in the government. The government was not an instrument of constructive purpose. It was an instrument of misjudgment, political repression, and moral question. However, I did not adopt the radical perspective that you had to fundamentally alter the society itself in order to solve the problem. I just believed you had to alter the policy, and there's nothing wrong with the political system. There was nothing wrong with American society itself. There was just a misjudgment of cosmic proportions that had been made and needed to be corrected. So I was one of those people who felt caught between the warring camps, defending the system and criticizing the policy. Political issues in the late 1960s intruded themselves into personal relationships in a way that I had never experienced before, so that close friends who happened to be taking a different political tack, particularly a radical one, could no longer be close friends. And indeed, some of them came in something that approximated an enemy, and it was a shock to have somebody that was close suddenly denigrate you for political reasons. So I did have some of that experience, a politicization of one's personal relationships, which is a very unpleasant experience. In 1967 and 68, the Vietnam War the issue began to transform itself from one of an assault or a critique of government policy to a critique of the government itself. And the reason basically is that the Johnson administration was stubbornly adhering to an increasingly controversial line of policy, which was resisted from both sides by the conservatives because it was not belligerent enough, and by the liberals because it was an unwarranted and unproductive intervention in the domestic affairs of another country. And the political mechanisms for changing it were not working. The administration was deeply enough entrenched and willful enough to resist political challenge, and therefore the mechanisms of government itself came under assault. Students who were subjected to the draft and prone at any rate to cosmic views of things began to believe that the root of evil was in the nature of American society itself and in the political system itself, and that radical alteration of those things were required in order to end the war. And they were pitted against people who were defending the system and resisting the policy. And there was a very sharp collision of perspective and judgment and obviously an emotion. And that all began to emerge in 67 and 68. Plus, at the same time, in interacting with that, the civil rights movement was beginning to establish truly dramatic momentum, also raising the question about the moral legitimacy of the society itself. And so we had a debate about the nature of the United States and a questioning of it that we have not seen either before or since in quite a long period of time. The atmosphere in Cambridge was increasingly tense at that time, in part because students who for one reason or another normally would have taken some time off to cool off, and their personal dynamics couldn't because the war made it unacceptable to them to leave college, and in part because the universities were the first target of protest, since the government itself and the political mechanisms were more or less impervious to that. The universities were chosen as instruments of bringing political pressure to bear on the society. So the universities in Cambridge at the time became very tense places. People with profound moral disagreements attacking one another in a way that is not very conducive actually to an academic atmosphere. People really challenging the basic legitimacy of other people on the basis of their political beliefs. I suppose it was the breakdown in civility and restraint was caused by the intensity of the issues. Uh, and I don't know, maybe it's the sort of thing, the nation as a whole was undergoing a profound change in its consciousness. It was learning about the complexities of the world, the limits of our own